Hi, I'm Claire from Thirsty Brush, and today we're going to do some more watercolouring on Colour and Calm, and we're going to use a combination of our brand new Confetti ink metallic watercolours and then just adding a few little accents with some standard watercolour, and this is the Miya palette. So I've used this book before on a previous video. If you're interested, it's the Watercolour with Me in the Forest by Dana Fox. You could draw your own design, or you could stamp out some of your designs if you've got any of our clear stamps or any other ones. If you stamp it out in a light grey, you'll be able to use it in a similar way to this, and then just paint and watercolour over the top. So I've started off with the green lime confetti ink, and it's going to be difficult for you to see the metallic mica shine on this from the overhead, but I'll show you at the end with the light how shiny and beautiful these watercolours are. And actually it's quite surprising for me that when I was testing them out, how much depth you really can get from a metallic watercolour, just like you can with a standard watercolour paint. They are a slightly different texture. You'll notice when I add the water, I give them a real good swirl in the pan. This is to make sure that you've got plenty of that mica and they go really creamy and beautiful. But you can see you can get some really easy shadow and depth just by having a little bit of extra, more concentrated colour on the one side of the leaf. And they're really easy to use, really smooth, great colours, really cool pigment in them. And then of course that beautiful mica shine that just comes out more and more as it dries. So just going over every single leaf and stem with the colour. So just use exactly as you would a normal watercolour here. You've got tons in these palettes, in these circular palettes that they come in, so it's really cool. You're going to have loads to use. So what we're really going to do here in this entire picture is put a base coat of the metallics. We're going to add a bit of detail with the metallics, and then just go in and add really fine detail with some of the dark colours of my standard watercolour. But you could do the whole thing with these metallics really. Or of course, if you don't have any metallic ones, feel free to experiment with your watercolouring in general. If you've got a normal watercolour palette like the Miya one, or another one of my favourites is the Winsor & Newton. So I'm using the image on the right hand side of the book just as a guide really. I think everybody does theirs slightly differently, so don't worry about matching it exactly. My colours are slightly lighter, but it has added on that picture this really cool kind of feathering detail to the edge of the leaves, which gives them like a pointy leaf, which I thought was really nice for this kind of dog rose style. So I'm just going in and using a very fine brush now, just to add those little bits of detail around every single leaf. Doing this while it's still kind of damp, the initial leaves, so they blend a bit, but it's not just going to completely disappear. Really nice different effect that you can add onto your leaves. So after this bit, I'm going to move on to the central flower, and I'm going to use the lighter of the two pinks to lay down a wash of colour, and the lighter on the right here is the millennial colour. So a really nice light wash. It is a little bit more pink than that in real life than on the camera. It actually looks really cool if you're painting onto black card. It really shows up really beautifully. And then while that's still wet, I'm going to go in and add some of the darker kind of real intense pink, which is called Sunset, into the centre of each petal, and I'm just kind of brushing it out and just adding some detail where I want some light and shade, and the darker shadows really, which will be at the centre of the petals and anywhere where they kind of overlap. So you can use a combination of little flicks, dots, just letting your brush lightly enter the lighter water and wet paint and just letting it blend out. You will see each one I've done in turn. As the time goes by, it's just blending into the water and the wet lighter pink paint. Because this has got a kind of pencil look edge to it, I just want to cover that up a little bit. So I'm very, very, very lightly, literally just with the tip of my brush, just going in and covering some of that, and it's adding a little bit of extra texture and detail for me. These two colours blend really beautifully because they're of a similar tone, even though they are very light and then very dark. So just dry that off a little bit, so allow me to add a little bit more detail that's going to sit on top. So back in with the lighter, and I'm just doing not another wash but just some more flicks, just to add a little bit more depth. So a little bit less water used when using the lighter pink here, so it's not just a wash on top of a wash, and it's just going to start to blend out some of that darker centre. Also, to give a bit of depth, even the pinkest of petals in real life have the other tones within them, very often kind of yellows or blues depending on the flower. So I've added a little bit of the gold mine, just with quite a lot of water, not too much to do another wash, but not too much paint either. And this is going to give some extra tone and depth to those petals. And with these kind of stages, it's really just a case of keep going until you feel that you've got the look that you want. You might be going for a really realistic look, or you might be going for a more modern abstract look where there's just one or two washes. So that's the kind of basis of the flowers, and I've done those with the metallics. So now I'm just going in to add some really fine detail with a tiny brush. I think I used, let me grab it, not the smallest, but I used a 3. So I'm adding the details then with some standard green from my Miya palette to add the veins. You could do this with the metallic as well if you don't have another watercolour palette, but just bear in mind, if you're not using a lighter and a darker shade, it's just not going to stand out as much. So I'm just adding a little bit of light and shade along the stems, along these little thorns and buds that are coming out, and near the bottoms of the leaves, just to give it a slightly more realistic look. Really light touch with the veins on the leaves, no pressure there on your brush at all, just literally letting it touch the paper. Always remember, with any watercolours, whether they're metallic or the standards, they're going to dry a bit lighter, so don't panic if you see it looking a little bit darker than you expected. Just let it dry back and see how it goes. A lot of watercolours can be reactivated anyway, depending on the cardstock that you're using too, so you can always add a bit more water. So I'm just adding some splatters to the background with the green with a small brush, and then I've gone back in again with a larger brush just to get a variety of different sizes of the splatters. And then now I'm going to use a bit of a mix of a pink and a red out of my palette to go back into that flower that's nice and dry, and just again add some really fine detail to get some extra depth in between those petals and right in the centre of the petals. Sometimes it can be hard to know when to stop with things like this, but actually I've learned that I was kind of stopping a little bit too soon sometimes. So keep going in and then just drying it off, look back, see how you are, and then, you know, sometimes you can always go back in and always add a bit more. So the last bit to do is just add the centre, and I'm doing that with the gold mine. So I made sure my flour is really dry, and this time I want the gold paint to be quite thick, so I've barely added any water, just a centre, and then I'm doing some stainings just flicking out from the edges with some little dots on each one. And this is going to give a super shiny, it's going to be almost textured when I dry it off, because all that mica, I noticed when it's very concentrated and you're not adding much water to your paints, when you dry it off with a hand tool, it actually can start to bubble sometimes. Now don't do that too long because you don't want it to burn, but it can start to bubble and actually give some really cool texture, because that mica is so concentrated once you take the water away. So just flatten the bubble, but doesn't that give a cool effect in the middle? And then when I hold it up to the light, look, you can really see that shine. So thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more, and see you soon.